morning, welcome to Totally Beads 12 Days of Christmas. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make these very beautiful gemstone and crystal cuff bracelets. They're really simple to do and it will give you a really lovely graduated look. So I hope you enjoy. Let's get making.
So I'm going to start by taking 1 metre of my wire and bringing the ends up together to find that midway point. Now I will eventually have 4 working strands, but I find by bringing one long length of about 1 metre up together, these behave a little bit better and I have a little bit more control when attaching these to my clasp. So I'm going to take the 2 ends together, just smoothing that through my fingers to make sure that they're sitting nicely against each other. And I'm going to take the 2 ends up through one of the holes in the connector, and I'm going to leave myself about 1 inch before bringing that back over and creating a little wrapped loop. So I'm going to pinch them down together, holding them quite close to the clasp, and bringing the 2 tail ends over together so they sit nice and neatly. I'm going to bring them round the top of the wire, back over, and I'm going to create myself probably about 2 or 3 wrapped loops. I'm just making sure those wires are next to each other so it's giving me a nice neat little wrapped loop. And then when I'm happy with that, I'm just going to trim off those tail ends. And then with my pliers, I'm going to make sure that these ends are tucked in so that there'll be no bits of the wire sticking out, so it won't scratch on anything. So I'm just using my pliers just to tuck in those little ends and keep them nice and flush. And then I like to just check by gently running my finger over them that there's nothing sticking up. And now I'm going to do exactly the same using the hole on the same side but underneath. So I'm going to take another length of wire, again about 1 metre in length, and bringing the 2 tail ends up together to find that midway point. And then I'm going to bring these through the other hole in the connector, bringing them through about 1 inch, making sure that they're not crossing over and they're sitting nicely together. And then I'm going to bring it down, pinch them near the top so I can create that loop, and bring these wires over together, underneath and back round. And all I want to make sure is that these wires are sitting nice and close so they're not overlapping. I'm going to wrap the same amount of time, so 2 or 3. And I just want to make sure that they're sitting around the same point as the wire on the top, so they're matching. Cut off the tail ends and using my pliers, just tuck them in to make sure there's nothing sticking up. And if I want to, I can use my pliers just to push these loops in closer together to neaten them up if need be. So they should be sitting like this next to each other. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 2 loops that I have at the bottom and I'm going to cut these loops open. So just give them a little trim just to open up these wires. So I've now got 4 individual wires to work with coming off my clasp. So I'm going to open the wires out, but before I do that, I'm going to take one of my little crystals and I'm just going to thread the crystal onto both ends of that first wire and bring it down close. And again, another little crystal over the other 2 tail ends of the wire on the other side, so that they're sitting up next to those wrapped loops. And now I can open them out. So I've got 4 working wires. And what I'm going to do as reference during this video is I'm going to refer to this as wire number 1, the second wire as wire number 2, this one as wire number 3, and this one as wire number 4. So I'm happy with the way they are sitting, and I'm going to start adding on some of my gemstone chips to these. And because I want to graduate this out, I'm going to start adding some of the smaller size chips. So I'm going to take my chips off my strand and pick out some of the smaller ones, and I'm going to attach a chip onto wire 1, another small chip onto wire 2, another onto wire 3, and another onto wire 4. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take wire 1 and 2 and I'm going to cross them over so they're sitting close to each other. And with my thumb and my finger, I'm just going to twist these wires 2 or 3 times to hold them in place. And then do the same with wire 3 and 4. I'm going to move the chips down towards the crystal, cross these wires over in place and give 2 little twists to secure. So now I have a wire running off the top and then 2 in the middle. And all I'm going to do occasionally is just smooth them out with my fingers, just so they sit in the right place while I start to weave in my extra crystals and gemstones. So now I'm going to use wire 2 and wire 3, and I'm going to add a crystal gemstone chip onto wire 2 and another one onto wire 3. I'm going to bring these over together and twist. And this will be the process that I'll repeat throughout, occasionally adding in a little crystal just to give it that pop of colour. And then I'm going to graduate up. So I'll repeat the pattern adding on 1, then I'll add on 2, so maybe 2 gemstones or 2 crystals or 1 of each. And then again, repeat that, add in 3, so I will make this graduated shape moving up towards the centre of the cuff. So I'm going to add another gemstone chip onto wire 1 and another onto wire 2. Bring them close together and give them a little twist. And then add another gemstone onto the end of wire 3. And again, add in another one onto wire 4. Bring the wires close together and twist. So by using the gemstones, I am using them. They're really lovely for this project because they're quite an irregular shape. They're all slightly different in size, and I can pop on a crystal every now and again just to add in a little bit of added sparkle. By adding them onto the middle wires, that will bring the cuff together, but also give it a very natural and organic look by using these chips. So I'm going to do another row of 1 onto the top, wire 1, a gemstone or crystal onto wire 2, crossing those wires over to bring them together and adding a little twist to hold them in place. And I like to repeat this pattern by doing the top, then the bottom, then the middle. So adding onto the 3rd and 4th wire, bringing them close in together and giving those wires a little twist. Doesn't matter which way you twist them, whichever's easiest for you. And then 1 more into the center. So 1 on wire 2 and 1 onto wire 3. Bringing them wires together. Pinch them down and give them a little twist together 2 or 3 times. And now I'm wanting this to graduate up. I'm going to add 2 onto each wire. So if you'd like to make this bracelet longer, you just need to add in more as you go. So for me, I like to add maybe 3 rows of 1, 3 sections of 2, 3 sections of 3 before graduating that back down. But you might want to add on maybe a couple of extra sections of the 2 or the 3. It's entirely up to you. They're all going to look very pretty. And can be adapted to the size that you like. So I've just put 2 crystals onto the top 2 wires, or 2 gemstones, or a mixture of both. And then I'm going to do the same on wire 3. And you don't need to add the crystals in the same place on each one, or the gemstones in the same place. They're all slightly different colour, the gemstones, and different shapes, so it's just adding to that texture. So bringing wires 3 and 4 together, holding them in place and giving a little twist 2 or 3 times, smoothing those wires out again with my finger so that they're in the position to add on the middle ones and bring it together. So add in 2 onto wire 2, and 2 onto wire 3. And these wires will move about and change position as you're twisting them, but whichever one lands here, I'll refer to as 1, 2, 3 and 4. So now I'm going to do another row of 2 onto that top wire, or wire number 1. Another 2 onto wire 2. I'm not paying much attention to the size of the chip I'm picking up at this point now. Giving them 2 little twists together, and then adding 2 onto the bottom wires. So wire 3 and wire 4. Bringing these in together, so if you need to, you can just move one of the wires down towards the other one and the other up towards that middle one. And you can see it's starting to graduate out and get a little bit wider. And then I'm adding another 2 onto the middle. So wire number 2 and wire number 3. Bring these 2 close together. You will see little bits of the wire exposed, and that's okay. I think that adds to its charm. Kind of looks like it's crocheted a little bit, but it's really easy. You're just repeating that pattern. And then I'm going to add another row of 2 to the top. And the second wire. Bring them together and twist. And then add in another chip onto wire 3, a crystal onto wire 4. I'm doing 2 onto each of those. Bring them together and add a little twist. And then this is going to be my last row of 2 on the center ones before we graduate that out again. So 2 onto the middle wires, bringing them together and giving it a little twist. Smooth those wires back out, and you can still shape this. It becomes quite malleable, so you can space them out by giving them a little pull, or you can push them closer together. And now I'm going to add 3 onto the top wire. Occasionally adding in those little crystals, which will look lovely against whichever gemstone chips that you have, and the wire will also complement that. So I'm adding 3 this time onto wires 1 and 2, bringing them together and giving a little twist. I'm adding 3 onto wires 3 and 3 onto wire 4. bringing them together and just pinch and twist where those wires cross. And then 3 onto the middle. So what I'm referring to as wire 2. The other, which is wire 3. So we're just repeating this process each time, adding on our chips or our gemstones or crystals, bringing the wires together, giving them a little twist. And I can shape this as I go. So it's starting to take shape already. I'm going to add another row of 3. Just get some more of my crystals out. Another row of 3 onto wire number 2. Again onto those bottom wires. Move this one out the way. And then don't forget to do the same again in the middle with wires 2 and 3, just to bring them in close together. I think I'm going to do one more row of 3 before I'm going to start bringing this back down. So pour out your gemstones and your crystals and just pick them up at random. Three onto the top. Three onto wire number 2. Bring them together and twist. Add in 3 onto wire number 3. Another 3 onto wire number 4. Bring them together and twist. And then to bring these wires in together, I'm going to add another 3 onto wire number 2. And onto wire number 3. So I tend to cross them to find where I would like them to sit so they're close together. Give them a little pinch and a twist. So at this point, you can put it onto your wrist and check you're at that halfway point, because we're going to repeat this process, but now graduating back down. So I'm going to add 2 this time onto the top wire. Number 1, 2 onto wire number 2. Bring them together and twist. And twist them 2 or 3 times, whichever you prefer, just to make sure that they're held in place. Add in 2 onto wire number 3. And 2 onto wire number 4. So you can see by just adding the less amount of crystals and gemstones, it's starting to taper back down. Bring them together with a pinch and a twist. And repeat. I'm going to repeat this another 2 times, I think. So add in the next layer of 2 onto the top 2 wires. Another group of 2 onto the bottom 2 wires. And onto the middle 2 wires. Just give it a little rotate to find that little hole that will run through your gemstone chip. Bring them together and twist. My last group of 2 onto the top. It's a really easy way to achieve quite a detailed bangle or bracelet cuff, as you don't need to do any wire wrapping, there's no weaving. All you're doing is adding on those lovely crystals and lovely gemstones effortlessly twisting your wires together. And you'll have loads of gemstones on your strand as well, so you'll be able, you know, you'll use plenty. And if you like, you could make yourself a little pair of matching earrings if you wish. Bring in those middle ones together and twist in. And now I'm going to finish off with my layers of, or rows of one. So one onto the top on wire number 1 and 2, and twist, onto the bottom wires, wire 3 and 4, pinch it close together, your twists should be fairly small, and then add in one onto the middle, add another one onto the top, onto the bottom wires, and onto the middle. So you can see it's starting to taper back down. So I think I'll add a couple more rows on, so I think it looks fairly even on both sides. And then onto the middle. You'll see all I'm doing once I've added them on is just give them a little run through my fingers just to get them to sit round about where I want them. So this is going to be my last row. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to try and pull out some of my smaller size chips again. It really doesn't matter, but I think as we're tapering it down, it's nice to use the smaller size chips. So I'm adding a chip onto each one, twisting my top 2 wires, and my bottom 2 wires, that one an extra little twist. And then lastly, those middle 2 wires. Now what I'm going to do, now I'm happy with the length and the shape of my cuff, I'm going to bring these 2 wires together, so wires 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and I'm going to, without adding any other chips or crystals on, just going to give them little twists together. So twist in the top and twist in the bottom. And then I'm going to take my crystal and I'm going to pop that over both of those wires just to push them down back towards where we've put those twists, so it will be matching on both sides. And I'm also going to just trim the ends of these wires so they finish at the same point. It'll make it a little easier to work with. And now I'm just going to attach them back on to the other end of the clasp. So I'm going to turn my bangle over, just put them into the position I want. So I'm bringing the 2 wires up through the hole on the opposite side of the clasp on the connector, and I'm just going to bend over the wire so it's around the same on both sides. So if I've got 1 centimetre on this side, I've got the same here, and I'm just going to bring those wires up together and bend them over to create that matching wrapped loop, keeping the wires next to each other so those wraps are nice and neat, they're not crossing over. And I'm going to wrap about the same amount on each side till it reaches this crystal. And with my tools and my pliers, I'm just going to make sure that those little ends are nicely tucked in. You can give them another trim if you need to. Just make sure that they're nice and close and they're fully tucked under. You can sometimes tuck them into your crystal as well, and then you're making sure there's no little bits of wire sticking out. It's just making sure that that's nice and flush. And then the same again on the other side. So I'm bringing these 2 wires coming out of that crystal, either up and over or underneath, whichever you prefer. I'm going to go through that hole in the connector, making sure it's around the same length as the one above it and on the opposite side.
Thank you for joining me on today's tutorial. I hope you enjoyed making your gemstone cuffs, and I hope you have a really wonderful Christmas. Stay safe and season's greetings.